High in the Andean mountains, an intrepid explorer named Dr. Elias Kane sets his drone to hover over the ancient ruins of Machu Picchu. As the camera pans across the breathtaking scenery, something strange catches his eye, a metallic glimmer in the sky darting behind a peak. His heart races as the drone captures the unthinkable, a craft of unearthly design, shimmering and vanishing. But what Elias discovers when he follows the trail isn't just otherworldly. It rewrites human history. The winds howled through the peaks of the Andes as Dr. Elias Kane tightened his scarf and adjusted his hiking gear. The sun, a pale disk hanging low on the horizon, cast golden rays over the ancient ruins of Machu Picchu. For an archaeologist, the place was a dream and a mystery, an enduring testament to human ingenuity, and, perhaps, something more. Elias had spent months researching rumors of unexplored sections of the site, parts of the ruins that remained shrouded in secrecy. Whispers of strange carvings and artifacts that defied classification had circulated among local guides and explorers for years. He was determined to uncover the truth. Armed with his trusty drone, a cutting-edge camera, and a notebook brimming with theories, he set out to capture the magic of the site from above. The drone buzzed as it ascended, its camera panning over the iconic terraces and stone structures. Elias watched the live feed on his tablet, marveling at the precision of the Incan architecture. Every stone seemed to hum with history, with a story waiting to be told. But then something peculiar happened. The feed flickered. For a brief moment, static interrupted the transmission before the screen went dark. Elias frowned, tapping the screen. A weak signal icon flashed in the corner. That was odd. His equipment was state-of-the-art, designed to function in remote locations. He glanced up just in time to see it, a glint of silver darting across the sky, so fast it was nearly imperceptible. He squinted, trying to make sense of what he had seen. A bird? No, it was too reflective. A plane? Not at that speed. It had to be something else. The drone's camera sputtered back to life, and Elias quickly brought it down to inspect the footage. As he replayed the video, his heart raced. There it was again, a metallic object, disc-shaped, zooming past the frame. It was brief but undeniable. Whatever it wasn't anything he had seen before. Excitement mixed with apprehension as he packed up his equipment and followed the direction of the sighting. The terrain grew steeper, the paths narrower. He clambered over rocks and ducked under overhanging branches, his breath fogging in the cool air. As he climbed, the rhythmic static returned, this time accompanied by a faint hum. It seemed to emanate from the very ground beneath his feet. Elias stopped to catch his breath and check his compass, only to find the needle spinning wildly. His GPS device was equally useless, its screen a chaotic blur of numbers and symbols. Whatever was interfering with his equipment was powerful and not natural. Then he saw it. Nestled in a rocky alcove, hidden from view, was an opening. It wasn't part of the main ruins. It looked untouched, undiscovered. The entrance was small and unassuming, framed by jagged rocks and overgrown with moss, but something about it felt deliberate. He hesitated. Every rational part of his mind told him to turn back, to document the sighting and report it to the authorities. But the explorer in him, the part that had spent years chasing mysteries, couldn't resist. He ducked into the opening, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The passageway was narrow, the air damp and heavy. Strange symbols adorned the walls, glowing faintly under the beam of his light. They were unlike any Incan markings he had ever seen, geometric and intricate, almost technological. His hand brushed against one of the symbols and he felt a strange vibration, as if the stone itself was alive. The passage opened into a larger chamber and Elias gasped. The room was vast, its walls covered in more glowing symbols. At the center stood a pedestal, and atop it rested an orb, pulsating with a soft, otherworldly light. The hum he had heard earlier was louder now, resonating in his chest. Cautiously, he approached the pedestal, his flashlight flickering as he drew closer. The orb seemed to respond to his presence, its light intensifying. He reached out, his fingers hovering over its surface. The moment he made contact, the room came alive. The symbols on the walls lit up, projecting beams of light that converged above the pedestal. A holographic image appeared, a map of the stars, unlike any Elias had ever seen. It depicted constellations both familiar and alien, with one set of coordinates highlighted in a brilliant blue. Elias stumbled back, his mind racing. This wasn't just an artifact, it was a message. But from whom? And why? The air grew heavy with static, and a voice, neither mechanical nor human, whispered unintelligible words in his mind. The orb's light pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, as if alive. The hum grew louder, almost deafening, and the ground began to tremble. Elias grabbed the orb and bolted for the exit, the passageway collapsing behind him. As he emerged into the open air, gasping for breath, he looked back to see the entrance sealed, as if it had never been there. His heart pounded as he cradled the orb. Whatever he had just discovered, it was beyond anything he had ever imagined, and he had a feeling this was only the beginning. Elias Kane crouched in the shadow of a jagged cliff, his breathing ragged as he turned the orb over in his hands. It was smooth and cool to the touch, yet faintly vibrating, as if alive with unseen energy. The glowing symbols etched into its surface pulsed gently, casting an otherworldly light on his face. Whatever this object was, it wasn't Incan, or human. His mind raced, replaying the events of the last hour, the sudden UFO sighting, the hidden chamber, the strange markings, and now this artifact. The weight of it pressed heavily into his palms. This wasn't chance. It was deliberate. He was certain of that. The rhythmic hum of the orb broke his thoughts. It felt almost alive, urging him to act. The symbols on its surface shifted, forming deliberate patterns, almost like a code. But before he could make sense of it, a sound stopped him cold. Rustling leaves. Elias froze. The jungle wasn't silent, but this noise was different, deliberate. Someone was out there. Quickly, he dimmed the orb's light with a cloth and crouched low, his heart pounding. The rustling grew louder, accompanied by faint whispers. He scanned the foliage. Silhouettes moved cautiously, their steps deliberate. They weren't locals or tourists. They were searching for him, or the artifact. Sliding the orb into his backpack, Elias crept along the cliff's edge, keeping to the shadows. His mind raced. Who were they? Government agents? Mercenaries? Treasure hunters? Whoever they were, they had the advantage. Organized, armed, and relentless. The faint hum of the orb seemed to grow louder with every step, almost as if protesting his retreat. Elias pressed on, navigating the uneven terrain as quickly and quietly as he could. If they caught him, he knew the artifact would be lost, and possibly his life. Hours passed as he trekked deeper into the jungle. The sounds of pursuit faded, replaced by the ambient hum of insects and rustling leaves. Finally, he allowed himself a moment to rest against a moss-covered tree. The orb's vibrations had subsided, its glow faintly visible through the fabric of his bag. He couldn't linger. The artifact wasn't safe out here, exposed. His thoughts turned to the small cabin he'd rented at the forest's edge, a few hours' hike away. It was isolated, secure, a place where he could study the orb without fear of interruption. Steeling himself, Elias set off again. The path grew steeper and darker as the sun set, the jungle becoming a labyrinth of shadows. Relying on his flashlight, Elias pushed forward. By the time he reached the cabin, exhaustion weighed on him like lead. He fumbled with the key, his hands trembling, and finally stumbled inside. Bolting the door and drawing the curtains, he collapsed into a chair. The silence of the cabin was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the orb. Elias set it on the table, staring at it with a mix of awe and dread. What was it? Where had it come from? Why had it reacted to him? He pulled out his notebook and began sketching the symbols he'd seen in the hidden chamber, comparing them to those on the orb. None matched known Incan glyphs or any language he'd ever encountered. They felt alien, deliberate, as if part of a message he was meant to decipher. As Elias worked, the orb began to glow brighter, flooding the room with an eerie blue light. He leaned back, startled, as a three-dimensional hologram emerged, floating above the table. The image was vivid. A star map, its constellations both familiar and alien. Celestial bodies swirled around him, their positions marked by glowing coordinates. His breath caught as he recognized one constellation, Orion's Belt. But the stars around it were foreign, as if the map showed the sky from a distant vantage point. At the center was a pulsating point of light, marked with the same blue symbol he'd seen earlier. The orb's hum intensified, and Elias felt warmth radiating from it. Tentatively, he reached out, his fingers brushing against the hologram. The moment he made contact, a surge of energy coursed through him. His vision blurred as images flooded his mind, towering alien structures, luminous beings, landscapes of impossible beauty, and a massive construct that resembled a gateway. The vision ended abruptly, leaving him gasping for air. His hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the table. Whatever this artifact was, it was no mere relic. It was a key, a gateway to something far beyond human understanding. As the hologram faded, the orb dimmed, its light retreating to a soft glow. Elias sat in stunned silence, the weight of his discovery sinking in. He wasn't holding just an artifact. He was holding a message, a warning, and perhaps a connection to an interstellar truth. But he wasn't alone. Somewhere out there, others were searching for the orb, and they wouldn't stop until they had it. Elias knew time was against him. The artifact had chosen him, and now it was up to him to uncover its secrets before it was too late. As the hum subsided, he made a silent vow to protect what he had found, no matter the cost. Elias Kane awoke to a soft blue glow filling the room. For a moment he thought it was dawn, but as his eyes adjusted, he realized it was the orb, pulsating like a heartbeat. He hadn't touched it since the vision. The last few hours had been a blur of adrenaline and exhaustion, but now the artifact seemed to demand his attention again. Rubbing his temples, Elias sat upright and grabbed his notebook. He flipped through his sketches and hastily written notes, piecing together what little he understood. The star map the orb had projected wasn't just a map, it was a message. The highlighted coordinates and the images of alien constructs haunted him. What were they pointing to? And why him? He leaned closer to the orb, careful not to touch it directly. The symbols on its surface had shifted again, forming a new sequence that seemed to ripple like water. It was mesmerizing. He reached for his phone, hoping to capture the new pattern, but as soon as he aimed the camera, the device shut off. Its battery, fully charged hours ago, was now completely drained. Frustration bubbled within him. Whatever technology powered the orb, it defied explanation. It wasn't just advanced, it was something else entirely. As he stared at the artifact, the faint hum returned, growing louder until it resonated in his chest. Then, without warning, the orb projected another hologram. This time, the image wasn't of stars. It was a structure, massive and alien in design, with sharp angles and glowing veins of light running along its surface. It floated in a void, surrounded by swirling clouds of cosmic dust. At its base, the same blue symbol from the star map pulsed rhythmically. Elias scribbled furiously in his notebook, trying to capture every detail. The structure was unlike anything he had seen, yet it felt eerily familiar, as if he had glimpsed it in his vision. The orb's hum grew louder and the projection shifted. A series of symbols flashed in rapid succession, almost too fast to process. Then the image disappeared, plunging the room back into dim light. As he pondered his next move, a sharp knock at the door shattered his concentration. Elias froze. The cabin was remote. No one should know he was here. His pulse quickened as he grabbed a small knife from the kitchen counter and approached the door. "Dr. Kane," a deep voice called from outside. "We know you're in there. Open the door and no one gets hurt." Elias's grip tightened on the knife. Whoever they weren't friendly. He peered through the window, his breath catching when he saw the dark silhouettes of men in tactical gear surrounding the cabin. They were armed, their weapons glinting faintly in the moonlight. Cursing under his breath, Elias backed away from the door. He couldn't let them take the orb. He had seen what it was capable of, and in the wrong hands, it could be catastrophic. But how could he escape? The cabin had only one exit, and the men outside had it covered. The orb's hum grew louder, almost as if it sensed the danger. Its glow intensified, casting sharp shadows on the walls. Desperation drove Elias to pick it up. The moment his fingers touched its surface, the symbols on the orb shifted violently and the hum turned into a deafening roar. Before he could react, a shockwave erupted from the artifact, sending him sprawling to the floor. The room filled with blinding light, and for a moment he thought he was going to pass out. When the light dimmed, Elias opened his eyes to find the cabin eerily silent. The armed men were gone. Staggering to his feet, Elias rushed to the window. The area outside was deserted, the ground charred in a perfect circle around the cabin. Whatever the orb had done, it had repelled the intruders. But it had also made one thing abundantly clear. The artifact wasn't just a key, it was a weapon. Elias stared at the orb, its glow now soft and steady. He couldn't stay here. The attack confirmed his fears. Others knew about the artifact and they would stop at nothing to obtain it. He needed to move, to find a safe place where he could unravel its mysteries without constant threats. Packing his belongings, Elias strapped the orb securely into his backpack. As he stepped out of the cabin, the crisp night air stung his face. The jungle was alive with sound, but every shadow felt like a pair of eyes watching him. He couldn't trust anyone. Not now. His first stop would be a nearby village where he could resupply and gather intel. From there, he would decide his next steps. The coordinates from the star map still burned in his mind, a beacon pulling him forward. He didn't know where they would lead, but he was certain of one thing: this was bigger than him. The orb was a piece of something far greater, and its secrets held the power to change everything. As he vanished into the dense jungle, the orb's hum resonated faintly, a reminder of the journey ahead. Elias knew the road would be treacherous, but he was no stranger to danger. Whatever lay at the end of this path, he was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The village lay at the edge of the jungle, a cluster of wooden huts with thatched roofs. Smoke from cooking fires spiraled lazily into the sky as Elias Kane approached cautiously. He pulled his backpack tighter, mindful of the artifact within. The orb's faint hum was almost imperceptible, but Elias felt its weight in every step. He couldn't afford to attract attention. The villagers moved about their day, mending nets, tending animals, chatting under the shade of a large tree. Yet something about the atmosphere unsettled Elias. He felt eyes on him, a sensation he couldn't shake. Stopping at a modest stall, he purchased water from an elderly woman. Her gaze lingered on him, curious but wary. Elias moved quickly to the outskirts of the village where he could sit and collect his thoughts. Unfolding his notebook, he stared at the sketched coordinates from the orb's earlier projection. He needed to decode their location, but without proper equipment, the task felt insurmountable. "Those numbers mean something to you?" The voice startled Elias. He spun around to see a man in his 30s, tanned and wiry, leaning casually against a tree. "Don't worry," the man said, raising his hands. "I'm not here to hurt you." Elias studied him warily. "Who are you?" "Mateo," the man said. "And you? You're not from around here." "No," Elias replied, his guard up. "Just passing through." Mateo smirked. You're not fooling anyone. Strangers have been asking about someone like you, men with guns. Whatever you're carrying, it's dangerous." Elias felt his stomach knot. The men from the cabin had tracked him here. "Why are you telling me this?" Mateo shrugged. "You don't look like you belong with them, and if they're after you, maybe you need help." Elias hesitated. Trusting a stranger was risky, but Mateo seemed sincere. "I need to reach these coordinates," Elias said, showing him the notebook. "Can you help me?" Mateo's brow furrowed as he studied the numbers. This is deep jungle territory. Dangerous. Maybe beyond the border. "I'll pay," Elias said. "Name your price." Mateo shook his head. "It's not about money. It's about survival. But, fine, I'll guide you. Just know, if things go bad, you're on your own." They left at dawn, the jungle alive with the calls of birds and the rustling of unseen creatures. Mateo moved with practiced ease, hacking through thick undergrowth while Elias struggled to keep up. The orb's hum grew stronger with each step, as if guiding them. At night, the jungle came alive with eerie sounds. Elias found himself clutching the orb like a talisman. By the third day, the jungle thinned, revealing a clearing. At its center stood a massive stone structure, ancient and overgrown. Symbols covered its surface, symbols identical to those on the orb. Mateo whistled. "This what you're looking for?" Elias approached the structure, his pulse racing. The orb in his hands vibrated intensely, its glow illuminating the carvings. He placed it on a circular depression in the stone, and the ground trembled. The symbols lit up, casting the clearing in brilliant blue light. With a deep rumble, the structure shifted. A passageway opened, its interior pulsing with faint light. Elias turned to Mateo. "You don't have to come." Mateo hesitated, then shook his head. "Not leaving you to face this alone." The passageway was cold, its walls alive with shifting symbols. The deeper they ventured, the stronger the orb's hum became. At the heart of the structure lay a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. At its center was a pedestal, and atop it rested an object shaped like a star, glowing with otherworldly light. Elias felt the orb vibrate violently in his hands, as if in recognition. He stepped toward the pedestal, but before he could reach it, a low growl echoed through the chamber. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in darkness, its eyes glowing like embers. "You should not have come," it said, its voice reverberating in their minds. Mateo drew his knife, though it seemed pitifully inadequate. The figure advanced, its form shifting like smoke. Elias felt the orb heat up in his hands, its glow intensifying. Energy coursed through him, a connection he couldn't explain but felt deeply. The artifact seemed to recognize its counterpart on the pedestal. As the figure lunged, Elias felt a surge of power from the orb. A shockwave erupted, throwing the shadowy being back. It howled, its form dissipating into the darkness, but the chamber continued to quake. Symbols on the walls blazed with light as the pedestal began to rise, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Inside was a small metallic device, its surface etched with the same glowing symbols. Elias hesitated, but the orb in his hands pulsed rhythmically, urging him forward. He grabbed the device and instantly, the tremors stopped. The chamber fell silent, the light dimming to a soft glow. Mateo stared at him, his face a mix of awe and terror. "What the hell did you just do?" "I don't know," Elias admitted, clutching both the orb and the device. "But whatever this is, it's only the beginning." The jungle was eerily quiet as Elias and Mateo emerged from the ancient structure, the orb and device secured in Elias's pack. The air felt heavy, charged with energy. The events in the chamber lingered in their minds, the shifting walls, glowing symbols, and the shadowy figure. "What now?" Mateo asked, breaking the silence. Elias glanced at the device, its surface etched with glowing symbols. "We figure out what this is and why it was hidden," he replied, though uncertainty lingered in his tone. Matteo shook his head. "That thing back there wasn't human, was it?" Elias didn't answer. "We need to move. If those men are still after us, they'll find this place soon." Matteo nodded, and they set off into the jungle. The orb's hum had softened, but Elias could feel its energy vibrating faintly in his chest. The device, however, was cold and silent, its purpose still unclear. The jungle grew denser, the terrain more treacherous. Hours passed before they stopped by a small stream to rest. Matteo refilled his canteen, his gaze darting toward the shadows. "We're being followed," he said quietly. Elias stiffened. "How do you know?" Matteo gave a tight nod toward the tree line. "I've been in jungles long enough to know when I'm being hunted." Elias's pulse quickened. Trusting Matteo's instincts, he stood. "We need to keep moving." They quickened their pace, the orb's hum growing louder as if urging them forward. By nightfall, they reached a small clearing dominated by a stone altar engraved with symbols. Elias placed the orb on the altar, and it began to vibrate, glowing brighter as the symbols lit up. Matteo stepped back, knife drawn. "What's happening?" Matteo asked, his voice tense. Before Elias could respond, the device in his pack activated, emitting a beam of light that connected with the orb. A glowing map appeared above the altar. Earth, overlaid with luminous lines and points. One point pulsed brightly, marking a location deep in the Amazon. "It's a network," Elias murmured. "There are more sites like this." Matteo frowned. "And you're going there, aren't you?" Elias nodded. "I have to find out why this was left behind. It's bigger than us." Gunfire erupted, cutting through the stillness. Figures emerged from the jungle, armed and moving with precision. Elias grabbed the orb and device, shoving them into his pack. "Run!" he shouted. They sprinted into the jungle as bullets tore through the clearing. The orb's hum became deafening. A sudden explosion sent them sprawling, dirt raining down. Matteo pulled Elias to his feet. "Keep moving!" They ran until their lungs burned and stumbled into another clearing, where a massive stone doorway was carved into a cliff. The orb's vibrations reached a fever pitch. "It's reacting to the door," Elias said. Matteo glanced at him. "This better be worth it." Elias placed the orb in a circular recess at the door's center. The ground trembled as the door slowly opened, revealing a glowing passage. Without hesitation, they stepped inside. The tunnel was cold, the walls alive with faintly glowing symbols. The air felt electric. The orb lit carvings on the walls, scenes of constellations, planets, and towering structures. Matteo pointed to one. "These match the ones back there. It's all connected." Elias nodded. "A map, or a history. Whoever built this left these trails for a reason." The tunnel opened into a massive chamber. High above, beams of light crisscrossed like a celestial grid. At the center was a monolithic structure, its surface covered in glowing symbols. Elias felt the device in his pack heat up, syncing with the orb. Energy coursed through him as he stepped forward. The orb pulsed violently, and a low hum filled the chamber. Matteo hung back, knife ready. "This place doesn't feel right." Elias placed the orb in a recess at the structure's base. The entire chamber came alive. Beams of light converged and symbols flared. A deep voice echoed. "The path has been activated." Matteo spun, eyes wide. "What was that?" Elias couldn't answer. The voice seemed to vibrate in his chest. The structure shifted, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was another device, smaller but radiating similar energy. Elias reached for it, but the chamber shook. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in darkness, its form twisting and ethereal. Its eyes burned with unnatural light. "You were not meant to continue," it said, its voice cold and inhuman. Mateo stepped forward, knife raised. "Stay back!" The figure advanced, oppressive in its presence. Elias grabbed the second device, the orb flaring brighter in response. Energy erupted, creating a shockwave that sent the figure reeling. "Go!" Elias shouted, pulling Mateo toward the tunnel. They sprinted back, the ground trembling beneath their feet. The chamber roared as the structure's energy crescendoed. Just as they cleared the doorway, the tunnel collapsed, sealing the chamber. Panting, they emerged into the jungle. The devices in Elias's pack pulsed faintly, stabilizing. Mateo glared at him. "What are we dealing with?" Elias didn't have an answer. All he knew was that their journey was far from over. The jungle stretched endlessly before them, a labyrinth of shadows and sounds that seemed to close in with each step. Elias Kane and Mateo trudged forward, the devices in Elias's pack vibrating faintly, as if guiding them. Neither spoke, the weight of what they had just escaped hanging heavily between them. "We should stop," Mateo said finally, his voice hoarse. "Figure out where we're headed before we walk into another trap." Elias nodded, sinking to the ground beneath a towering tree. He pulled the notebook from his pack, flipping to the sketch of the glowing map from the altar. The coordinates from the Amazon site pulsed in his memory like a beacon. "This is it," he muttered. "Whatever's at this next site, it's the end of the path." Mateo leaned against a rock, his knife still in hand. And what if it's another one of those things, like the shadow back there? Elias didn't answer. His mind was too consumed with the implications of their journey. Whoever, or whatever, had created these artifacts had left them behind for a reason. He could feel it in every hum of the orb and every pulse of the devices. It wasn't just a mystery to solve, it was a warning. As they rested, the orb's vibrations intensified, pulling Elias's attention. He pulled it from the pack, its glow casting eerie shadows on the jungle floor. Symbols began to shift across its surface, forming patterns that seemed deliberate. Elias realized with a start that it was forming words. No, instructions. "Follow the light," it seemed to say. Before Elias could process this, the orb emitted a beam of light piercing the dense jungle canopy. The beam moved slowly, like a celestial compass pointing them forward. Mateo cursed under his breath. "I guess we're not resting." They followed the light through the jungle, its path winding and unrelenting. Hours passed before they reached another clearing, this one dominated by a massive, ancient structure that dwarfed everything they had seen so far. It rose like a black monolith, its surface smooth and unmarked, save for a single glowing symbol at its center. Elias approached cautiously, the devices in his pack vibrating wildly. As he placed the orb in a recess below the glowing symbol, the ground trembled, and the monolith came alive. Symbols lit up across its surface, and a low, resonant hum filled the air. A voice echoed, deep and layered, as if spoken by many beings at once. "You have come far, Seeker, but are you ready to see the truth?" Elias hesitated. "What truth?" "The truth of your kind, of what was, and of what will be." Mateo stepped forward, knife raised. "This doesn't feel right, Elias." The monolith shifted, its surface parting to reveal a doorway. "Enter," the voice commanded. Elias looked at Mateo, who shook his head. "You're insane if you think I'm going in there." "I have to," Elias said. "This is what it's all been leading to." Without another word, Elias stepped through the doorway, the orb and devices lighting his way. The air inside was cold, the walls alive with shifting patterns of light. At the chamber's center stood a massive sphere, its surface swirling like liquid metal. "Touch it," the voice said. Elias hesitated, but something compelled him forward. As his hand made contact with the sphere, a surge of energy shot through him. Visions filled his mind, of Earth millennia ago, visited by beings from the stars. These beings had shared their knowledge, guiding early civilizations and leaving behind artifacts to safeguard humanity's future. But the vision turned dark. Elias saw a cataclysm, a force from beyond the stars, vast and destructive, consuming everything in its path. The artifacts were not just tools, they were humanity's last hope, meant to awaken when the danger returned. Elias gasped, pulling his hand back. The voice spoke again. "You are the chosen, Elias Kane, the guardian of the path. The threat approaches and the artifacts must be united. Only then can the gateway be activated." "What gateway?" Elias asked, his voice shaking. The sphere dimmed, and the chamber fell silent. The orb and devices in his pack glowed faintly as if waiting. Elias turned back, exiting the chamber to find Matteo waiting. "Well?" Matteo asked. "What did you see?" "Enough," Elias said, his voice grim. "We're not done. There's more to find." They moved quickly, the urgency of their mission driving them forward. The jungle seemed less imposing now, as if the artifacts themselves were guiding their way. But as they walked, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. By nightfall, they reached a ridge overlooking the endless expanse of the Amazon. Elias paused, clutching the orb. The visions of the cataclysm played in his mind, vivid and terrifying. He turned to Matteo. "We have to find the rest. It's the only way." Matteo didn't argue. For the first time, he seemed to understand the gravity of their mission. "Then, let's not waste time." As they descended into the jungle, the orb pulsed steadily, its hum a reminder of the danger ahead. Elias knew the journey was far from over. The artifacts held the key to humanity's survival, and time was running out. Above them, unseen and silent, a metallic glimmer moved across the sky, watching, waiting.